Rain lashed against the windshield as Naomi Carter, a young banker, drove home through the storm. Her mind was on the endless reports waiting on her desk when something caught her eye. A frail shape lay by a flooded gutter. Naomi slammed on the brakes, heart pounding. She leapt out, shoes splashing into cold water. "Oh my God," she gasped. A teenage boy lay crumpled, trembling violently. His lips were cracked, his eyelids fluttering like torn paper. He looked seconds from death. Naomi knelt beside him, feeling his scorching forehead, panic clawing her chest. Without thinking, Naomi scooped him into her arms. His body felt disturbingly light, as though life itself had already left. "Stay with me, please," she whispered. She rushed to her car, soaked to the bone, and sped through the storm. At the hospital, nurses swarmed them, lifting the boy onto a stretcher. Naomi stood frozen, drenched and shaking. Hours dragged by as she sat outside the emergency ward, hands clenched in prayer. When the doctor finally emerged, he shook his head in disbelief. This boy, he wouldn't have lived another hour if you hadn't brought him. Relief flooded her. She sank into a plastic chair, eyes wet. Naomi didn't know him, not even his name, but something deep inside told her she couldn't walk away. The next day, the boy woke weakly. "What's your name?" she asked softly. "Elijah," he whispered. His voice was thin as paper. She smiled gently. "I'm Naomi." From that day, Naomi decided on something everyone around her would call madness. She would not abandon Elijah. Elijah was only 15. Life had been cruel. He was raised by his mother, who adored him. But one evening, she died in a car accident on her way to pick him from school. After her burial, her relatives stripped everything she owned, her house, savings, belongings, and left Elijah on the street. Lonely, hungry, and broken, he wandered until sickness crushed him. That stormy afternoon, as the gutter water swirled around him, Naomi had found him. Despite her own struggles, Naomi took Elijah in. She bought him clothes, paid his hospital bills, and later enrolled him in school. But kindness came with a price. At first, neighbors whispered. Friends mocked her. "Why waste your life on a boy who isn't yours?" One sneered. Naomi ignored them. But then came her family. Her mother-in-law called Elijah a stray dog. And worst of all, her husband, Martin, grew jealous and cold. One night, Martin sat Naomi down at the dining table. His eyes were hard. "If you don't send that boy away," he said slowly, "I will poison him." Naomi froze. "Martin, he's just a child. I don't care," he cut her off. "Choose. Him or your marriage." Naomi trembled. How had the man she once loved become this cruel? She cried through the night. Elijah noticed her swollen eyes, but said nothing, though dread crept into his heart. Late one night, Elijah overheard Martin on the phone with his mother. Hidden by the hallway, his small hands trembled as he listened. "We'll end it before the week is over," Martin muttered coldly. "If Naomi won't send him away, we'll handle it our way." Elijah's heart stopped. They were planning to kill him. He crawled back to bed, tears streaming silently. He knew then, his presence was tearing Naomi's life apart. She had saved him, but he could not be the reason she lost everything. At 4 a.m., while the house slept, Elijah rose quietly. He packed nothing. He had no plan, no money, only faith. He placed a folded note in Naomi's work handbag and slipped out the door. The chill bit through his thin clothes as he walked into the darkness. Every step felt like his heart was breaking. Behind him, Naomi slept, unaware the boy she had saved was walking away to save her. Hours later, Naomi found the note while dressing for work. Her hand shook as she opened it. "Dear Sister Naomi, thank you for saving me. Thank you for loving me when no one else did. I'm not your blood, but you made me family. Please forgive me for leaving. I don't want to be the reason you lose your home, your husband, your peace. I will survive. I will find my way. One day, I hope you'll be proud of me. With love, Elijah." Tears blinded her. "No, Elijah," she sobbed, rushing through the streets. But he was gone. Elijah walked on through the cold dawn with nothing but faith. He believed leaving was the only way to protect Naomi. On his way to a strange town, robbers ambushed him. They beat him, stole his little food, and left him bleeding on the roadside. Lying there, Elijah wept bitterly. He had escaped death at the gutter only to fall again. But deep inside, a fragile voice whispered, "Don't give up." And so he rose, limping into the unknown. Days bled into nights as Elijah wandered the unfamiliar town. His feet blistered, his clothes torn, his body weak with hunger. He begged at street corners, whispering, "Please, anything." Most people ignored him. Some mocked him. He slept under abandoned stalls, curled up against the cold. At times, he wondered if he was cursed. Yet even in despair, he held onto humility. Whenever someone dropped a coin in his hand, he bowed low and whispered, "Thank you." It was the only thing keeping his heart alive. One dusty evening, Elijah swept outside a small provision shop just to earn leftover food. As he dragged the broom across the cracked tiles, a man paused to watch. The man was tall, with gentle eyes and worn sandals. He owned a tiny computer repair shop nearby. What caught his attention was not Elijah's ragged clothes, but his quiet discipline. The boy worked like someone who still believed in tomorrow. The man walked closer. "Hey, boy," he said softly. Elijah straightened nervously. "Yes, sir. Come to my shop tomorrow," the man said. "If you want, I'll teach you something." Elijah blinked. "Teach me?" The man nodded. "Computers." Elijah's heart leapt. He had always been curious about technology, though he had never touched a computer before. "My name is Mr. Ade," the man added. "Be here by 7. Elijah swallowed hard, hope sparking in his eyes. "Yes, sir. I'll be here." That night, he lay awake under a broken stall roof, staring at the stars with trembling excitement. For the first time in years, the future didn't look completely dark. The next morning, Elijah reported early. He swept floors, carried heavy boxes, and scrubbed dusty shelves. In between, Mr. Ade showed him how to plug cables, fix broken mice, and clean circuit boards. Elijah's eyes lit up with each explanation. He watched closely, his mind absorbing every word like water on dry ground. "You learn fast," Mr. Ade said after a few days. Elijah smiled shyly. "I want to be useful, sir." Weeks became months. Elijah's skills grew faster than anyone expected. He stayed late every night, reading torn scraps of old manuals, practicing on discarded machines. Soon, he was repairing phones, installing software, and explaining things to other customers like a professional. Mr. Ade often stood back, amazed. "You were born for this," he said one evening. Elijah flushed with pride. For the first time, he felt like more than a burden. He felt like someone who mattered. One day, a customer left behind an old, barely working laptop. Mr. Ade gave it to Elijah. "See if you can fix it," he said. Elijah worked on it for days, patient and determined. When it finally came alive, he wept quietly. That single laptop became his treasure. Every night after work, he tinkered on it, exploring codes, reading free tutorials, and dreaming of ideas far bigger than the small shop. He began sketching out a tiny tech solution he believed could change lives. Word about Elijah's talent spread through the community. People lined up outside the shop, asking for his help. He fixed devices others thought were impossible to repair. Companies began to notice. An investor came by one afternoon and watched him work silently, then said, "You're brilliant, boy. This mind of yours could go far." Elijah smiled politely, though his heart raced. For the first time, people weren't seeing an orphan or a beggar. They were seeing his gift. Within a few years, Elijah launched his own small startup with savings and support from local investors. He called it Eli Tech Solutions. What started in a dusty corner shop grew rapidly. His software tools solved real problems, and word of mouth carried his name like wildfire. Newspapers wrote about the boy genius who rose from the street. Elijah became a tech CEO before he turned 25. But even with the fame, he never forgot the woman who saved him when no one else cared, Naomi. By the time Elijah was building offices across cities, Naomi's life had collapsed. A deadly illness struck her down. Her body grew weak, her job let her go, and Martin, her husband, abandoned her on her sickbed. Her friends mocked her. Her family rejected her. Even her neighbors sneered when they saw her. One cruel afternoon, Her landlord threw her belongings onto the street. Naomi knelt in the dust, weeping. "Please, just a few more days," she begged. "I have nowhere to go." The landlord kicked her small bag aside. "You think I run a charity? Get out. You're nothing," he barked. Laughter rose from the neighbors around. Naomi tried to stand, but collapsed again, her body trembling from sickness and hunger. Shame burned her cheeks. She had given everything to others, yet had no one to stand for her now. The people mocked louder. They thought her story was over. None of them knew fate was about to flip the script in a way they could never imagine. The afternoon sun scorched the compound as Naomi knelt in the dust, surrounded by her scattered belongings. The landlord crossed his arms, glaring. "Leave before I call the police," he growled. The neighbors jeered, tossing cruel words like stones. Naomi wept silently, her body trembling, her spirit broken. She whispered a prayer under her breath. "God, if you can hear me, please help me." Just then, the distant rumble of engines grew louder. At first, no one paid attention, but the sound grew closer and heavier. A sleek black luxury car glided into the street and stopped in front of the crowd. Behind it, an army van screeched to a halt. Two towering officers stepped down, uniforms sharp, eyes scanning the chaos. The mocking laughter died instantly. The landlord froze. Everyone stood still as the car door opened slowly. Out stepped a tall, striking young man in a perfectly tailored suit, dark glasses reflecting the sun. His presence was commanding, his aura unmistakably powerful. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Naomi lifted her head weakly, blinking against the sun. At first, she didn't recognize him. The boy she had once carried from a flooded gutter was gone. In his place stood a man radiating confidence and strength. But then she saw it, the fire in his eyes. Her heart skipped. He stepped forward, his voice steady but soft. "Sister," he said. The word pierced her soul. Tears blurred her vision. Elijah," she whispered, her voice trembling like dry leaves in the wind. Elijah's throat tightened. He dropped to his knees in the dust before her, in full view of the stunned crowd. His suit brushed the mud, but he didn't care. "You saved me when I had nothing," he said, voice breaking. "You gave me life when the world left me to die. Today, I have come to thank you." Naomi covered her mouth, sobbing uncontrollably. The neighbors stood frozen, eyes wide. Even the landlord's face drained of color. Elijah rose and turned to the landlord, his voice calm but sharp as steel. "This woman is the reason I am alive today. The stone you rejected is the foundation of my life." The landlord's mouth opened, then shut. Shame swept across the faces of the neighbors who had mocked her. Elijah signaled one of the officers. The man saluted and began gathering Naomi's scattered belongings with careful hands. The neighbors watched in silence, guilt weighing down their stares. "Bring her things to the car," Elijah said. The officers obeyed immediately. He gently helped Naomi to her feet. Her knees shook. "I don't understand," she whispered. Elijah smiled through tears. "You don't need to. Just know that your love wasn't wasted." He opened the car door and guided her in like royalty. The neighbors lowered their eyes as the convoy engines roared to life. The cars glided away, leaving the stunned street in silence behind them. Inside the car, Naomi sat silently, staring at Elijah. Her mind whirled. How did this happen?" she whispered. Elijah took her hand gently. "Because of you," he said. "You gave me a chance to live. Everything I am today grew from that seed you planted when everyone else walked away." Tears ran down Naomi's cheeks. She gripped his hand like an anchor, unable to speak. The boy she once carried half dead from the gutter was now rescuing her. Elijah took her to a grand house in the city, a mansion filled with light and warmth. He bought her new clothes, hired doctors, and flew her abroad for the best medical treatment. Slowly, Naomi's health returned. Her strength came back. The woman who once knelt in dust now walked through marble halls like a queen. Elijah introduced her to his staff as the mother of my home, and they bowed respectfully. Naomi could hardly believe it was real. A year later, Elijah got married. The wedding was grand beyond imagination. Celebrities, politicians, and business leaders filled the glittering hall. Cameras flashed, music soared. But the most striking figure at his side was Naomi, dressed in elegant gold, tears of joy glistening in her eyes. Elijah held her arm proudly as he walked down the aisle with his bride. People whispered, "Who is she?" And he answered every time, "She is the woman who saved my life." That night, as fireworks lit the sky above the city, Naomi stood on the balcony, smiling as Elijah danced with his new wife. She thought of the stormy night she first found him by the gutter, trembling and near death. Back then, people said she was foolish for saving a boy who wasn't her blood. Now that same boy had become the man who restored her life. Her heart swelled with gratitude. Love, she realized, is never wasted long after the wedding ended. Naomi sat quietly in her room, the soft glow of a lamp washing over her face. She thought about how life had twisted and turned like a stormy river. Once, she had been mocked and abandoned. Now, the world celebrated her as the woman who saved a dying orphan. She whispered to herself, "God, you never forgot me." Tears slid down her cheeks, but they were tears of joy this time. For the first time in years, her heart felt whole. Elijah visited her later that night. He knelt by her chair, just as he had knelt in the dust that day. "I'll never forget what you did," he said quietly. Naomi touched his cheek gently. "And I'll never forget the boy who fought to live." They both smiled through tears. Silence filled the room, warm and full of love. There were no words big enough to carry what they felt, but they didn't need words. They understood each other perfectly. The next morning, Elijah gathered his board members and staff. He introduced Naomi as the matriarch of his home and life. "She is not my blood," he said firmly, "but she is my family. The reason I'm alive." The hall rose in applause. Naomi blushed, lowering her eyes, but Elijah beamed proudly. The woman they once called foolish had become a symbol of hope in his empire. Everyone could see the deep bond between them, unshakable, pure, and eternal. Naomi's story spread across newspapers, television shows, and social media. Headlines called her the woman who saved a billionaire. Interviews poured in, but Naomi stayed humble. "I just did what any heart should do," she said gently. People were moved by her simplicity. They saw her not as a hero, but as proof that love still existed in the world. Messages of gratitude poured in from strangers who said her story gave them courage to be kind. But not everyone felt proud. The neighbors who had mocked her avoided her gaze when she passed. The landlord who threw her out closed his shop whenever her car stopped nearby. Even Martin, her ex-husband, sent bitter messages asking for forgiveness. Naomi never replied. She had forgiven them silently, but she had moved on. She knew now that the people who break you are rarely the ones who heal you. God often sends help from unexpected places. One afternoon, Naomi visited the small gutter where she had found Elijah years ago. She stood under the same sky, though now it was bright and peaceful. Closing her eyes, she remembered the trembling boy she had carried in her arms. A smile touched her lips. "Thank you for that day," she whispered. "Thank you for making me stop the car." Cars rushed past, horns blaring, but Naomi heard only the quiet voice of grace in her heart. Later that day, Elijah joined her there. He stood beside her silently, looking at the cracked sidewalk. "I remember lying there," he murmured. Naomi glanced at him. "And I remember lifting you." They both chuckled softly. Elijah reached into his pocket and placed something small in her hand, a golden locket engraved with the words "For my angel." Naomi's eyes filled. She hugged him tightly, and for a moment, the world faded away. Only their bond remained. As years passed, Elijah's empire grew across continents, but he always kept Naomi close. He visited her every morning, called her every night, and never made a major decision without her counsel. People often asked him why he honored her so deeply. His answer was always the same: because when I was nothing, she saw me as something. The world called him powerful, but Elijah believed Naomi was the true hero of his story. Naomi spent her later years surrounded by comfort and love. Children in Elijah's foundation called her Grandma Naomi. She built a small charity for street kids, giving them food, clothes, and education. Because once, she would tell them, someone gave me back my life. Her laughter echoed through the halls, soft and bright. The woman who was once rejected had become a mother to hundreds. Her days were full, her nights peaceful. And every night before bed, Naomi would sit by her window, watching the city lights twinkle like stars. She thought of how kindness had once cost her everything, but returned to her 1,000-fold. She whispered the same prayer every night. Let me never grow tired of loving. Then she would smile, close her eyes, and drift to sleep, grateful that she had once stopped her car on a stormy afternoon and saved a boy who became her miracle. Years rolled by, and Elijah's name became legendary. His company spread across continents. His inventions changed lives, and his speeches filled stadiums. Yet whenever interviewers asked about his greatest achievement, he never spoke of money or fame. He would smile gently and say, "My greatest achievement is keeping a promise to the woman who saved me." The world admired him, but only Naomi knew the broken boy behind the brilliance. One evening, Elijah invited Naomi to speak at his company's anniversary gala. The hall glittered with lights and glass chandeliers. Powerful men and women filled the seats. Naomi stood on stage in a simple navy gown, her voice steady. "Kindness," she said softly, "is not weakness. It is strength wrapped in gentleness. I saved Elijah not because I expected anything back, but because no life is worthless." The hall erupted in applause. Elijah stood, eyes shining with pride. After the event, Naomi sat quietly in Elijah's office, sipping tea. "Do you ever wish your life had been different?" she asked. Elijah shook his head slowly. "No, because if my life had been easy, I might never have met you." Naomi smiled through tears. "And if I had listened to everyone who mocked me, I might have lost you." They both laughed softly. Their journey had been born in pain, but it had bloomed into something beautiful. Meanwhile, people who once rejected Naomi now used her story to inspire others. Schools told children about her. Churches shared her testimony. Even strangers stopped her on the street, thanking her for proving that love could still change lives. Naomi always answered the same way: "Don't thank me. Thank God for giving me the courage to care." Fame had not made her proud. It had made her even more gentle. Martin, her former husband, grew old and bitter. He lost his job, and even his friends abandoned him. One day, he saw Naomi on television, smiling among children she supported. Regret crushed him. He tried sending letters, but Naomi never replied. She bore no hatred, only distance. She had learned that peace sometimes means letting go, not holding grudges. Her heart had healed, and she would not let the past reopen her scars. Naomi's quiet strength drew people from all walks of life. Young women came to her for advice, calling her Mama Naomi. She told them gently, "Don't measure your worth by who accepts you. Measure it by how much love you give." Her words planted hope in broken hearts. Many who once thought they were too damaged to matter found courage to start again, just from hearing her story. One afternoon, Naomi walked through a shelter filled with street children. She paused by a small boy sleeping on a bench, thin and pale, shivering despite the warm air. Her heart squeezed. She pulled a blanket over him and whispered, "You matter, little one." Elijah watched from the doorway, smiling faintly. Later he said, "You still see what the world ignores." Naomi chuckled, "Maybe because I was ignored too once." As she grew older, Naomi moved into a serene home Elijah built for her on a hilltop overlooking the city. The house was surrounded by gardens bursting with flowers. Birds sang every morning. Naomi loved sitting on the porch at sunrise, watching light pour over the skyline. She often said it reminded her that even the darkest nights end eventually. Her life had become living proof of that truth. Sometimes, when the wind howled at night, Naomi remembered the stormy afternoon when it all began. She could still see the gutter water swirling, still feel the weight of Elijah's frail body in her arms. She would place her hand on her chest and whisper, "Thank you for letting me find him." That memory, though painful, filled her with peace. It reminded her that miracles often were the disguise of burdens. At first, Elijah visited her that night. They sat in silence, watching the city lights flicker like fallen stars. "Do you think people will remember our story?" he asked softly. Naomi smiled. "They don't have to," she replied. "As long as we remember." Elijah leaned his head on her shoulder like a child again. And in that quiet moment, the mighty tech mogul and the woman who saved him simply existed, as family, bound by love, stronger than time. Years later, Naomi grew frail with age. Her hair turned silver, her steps slowed, but her eyes never lost their warmth. She spent her mornings watering the flowers in her garden, and her evenings reading letters from the many children Elijah's foundation had helped. She smiled at every word. Each child's success felt like a piece of her own healing. She often whispered, "This is what love multiplies into." Elijah visited her every weekend, no matter how busy his schedule became. Sometimes he arrived in a convoy, sometimes alone, just to sit by her side. "You should rest more," she would tease gently. He would smile. "Rest can wait. Time with you cannot." Naomi laughed softly. Watching him reminded her of the thin boy she once carried through the rain. He had grown into everything the world once said he could never be. One quiet evening, Naomi sat on the porch with Elijah, watching the orange sunset dip below the skyline. The air was calm, the world hushed. "Do you know what saved you that day?" she asked. Elijah turned. "You," he said. She shook her head with a faint smile. "No, love did. I just listened to it." Elijah blinked, eyes stinging with tears. He reached for her hand and whispered, "Then I will spend my life listening to it too." Naomi's health slowly declined, but she remained serene. She refused hospitals, choosing instead to stay in the home Elijah had built for her. "I want to be surrounded by love, not machines," she said softly. Elijah honored her wish. He moved important meetings to her living room, just to sit near her. Staff whispered in awe, saying they had never seen a man of such power bow so gently to love. One night, Naomi called Elijah to her bedside. Her voice was faint, yet calm. "Promise me something," she said. "Promise you'll keep helping the forgotten ones, the ones like you once were." Elijah's eyes filled. "I promise," he whispered. Naomi smiled. "Good. Then my work is done." She closed her eyes, her fingers still wrapped around his. Peace settled over the room like a soft blanket. At dawn, Naomi passed away quietly in her sleep. Birds sang outside her window as sunlight spilled across the sheets. Elijah sat beside her, tears rolling silently down his face. He held her hand long after her soul had gone. The woman who once found him by the gutter had left the world in peace, wrapped in the love she had given so freely. Elijah whispered, "Thank you for everything." The news of her passing spread across the nation. Tributes poured in from world leaders, celebrities, and children she had once fed. Elijah organized a state-level memorial that filled an entire stadium. Thousands came dressed in white, holding candles. On the giant screen, pictures of Naomi's life played, her laughter, her gardens, her gentle hands holding broken children. The world wept, not for her death, but for the beauty she left behind. Elijah gave the final tribute. Standing before the silent stadium, he said, "Naomi Carter was not my mother by blood, but she became the heartbeat of my destiny. She found me dying and gave me life. She believed in me when no one else did. And every good thing you see in me today came from her love." His voice broke, but he continued. "She proved that one act of kindness can echo through generations." After her burial, Elijah built the Naomi Carter Foundation, a global network of schools, shelters, and hospitals for abandoned children. On its gate, engraved in gold, were Naomi's words, "No life is worthless." Children from every corner of the world walked through those gates, carrying hope. Elijah often visited the foundation and smiled whenever he saw their bright faces. It reminded him of the day he first looked up at Naomi through the rain and saw love. And so, the world never forgot their story. People spoke of the banker who saved a dying orphan, and the orphan who rose to give her back the life she lost. Naomi's kindness had seemed foolish to many, but it became her greatest blessing. It proved that rejection is not the end of destiny, and love is never wasted. For when you lift another, you plant seeds that one day may grow into a tree that gives you shade. And Naomi's shade would shelter the world forever.